You've spent your life trying to get it right. You followed the rules. You worked hard to please others, to succeed, to handle everything. But what if I told you none of that was the real beginning? Life really begins at 40, as Carl Jung said. But what does that mean? It means that now is when you stop surviving and actually start living. In this video, you'll understand why your best years are still ahead, even if nobody has told you this before. And, most importantly, you'll discover how to transform this phase into the most powerful one of your entire journey. For a long time, they sold us the idea that youth is the peak of life. But Carl Jung had another vision. He said that the first 40 years are actually just a rehearsal. It's as if we're merely setting the stage, choosing costumes, and testing the lights. The main performance only begins after 40. That's when the true script of our existence emerges, written no longer by others, but by ourselves, with more awareness and less hurry. Until 40, most people are too busy trying to fit in: school, work, relationships, status. Everything revolves around following the social manual that was delivered without question. And it's not meant badly. It's because this is the phase of experimenting, making mistakes, comparing yourself to others, and even getting a little lost. But there comes a time when the mirror starts giving back questions instead of answers. And that time usually knocks on the door around 40, bringing an invitation that changes everything. Do you want to continue living on autopilot, or discover who you really are? Jung saw this point in life as a spiritual crossroads. It's not about age in the chronological sense, but symbolic. It's when the gaze turns from outside to inside. Many begin to feel uncomfortable with what once seemed satisfying: career, routine, even relationships. It's like waking up from a long sleep and realizing you have lived half your life fulfilling expectations. And that's when the big turning point begins, but only if the person has the courage to listen to what this discomfort is trying to say. Many people hear middle age and immediately think of crisis, collapse, red sports cars, and impulsive decisions. But Jung saw this differently. This isn't a time of despair, but of transition. What seems like confusion is actually a calling. It's as if the soul were saying, "Hey, isn't it time to reevaluate everything?" And this whisper, when ignored, becomes a shout. That's why so many people feel the ground shake during this phase. In practice, this crisis often comes in disguise: insomnia, impatience, that feeling that nothing excites you like before. But if you look carefully, you'll realize that the discomfort is just a nudge to move beyond the surface. Jung said that the soul thirsts for meaning, and this thirst intensifies around 40, when conventional goals have either been achieved or lost their flavor. It's as if life were asking, "Okay, you've come this far. What now?" This moment, when well understood, can be the most powerful of adult life. It's a rare chance to reinvent yourself without having to start from scratch. It's not about throwing everything away, but about refining what already exists. An example? Some people change careers, others finally write that book they've been shelving for decades. Either way, the secret lies in hearing this call as an invitation, not as a problem. And it's at this point that we begin to understand why youth was just a phase of exploration. In youth, everything seems urgent. The pressure to be somebody, to succeed, to get it right the first time. And in this rush, most people borrow references from others: what parents would approve of, what gives status, what seems right in the eyes of the world. It's a phase marked by molds, not by essence. The person thinks they're discovering themselves, but often they're just adapting to the expectations of their environment. And that's natural. Nobody is born knowing who they are. But the problem arises when this adaptation becomes identity. The person begins to define themselves by the position they hold, the style they wear, the opinions of others. And when someone asks, "But what do you want?" the answer is vague or even silent, because until then, the focus was on conquering space, not questioning the path. Jung called this a phase of building the persona, where the soul is still backstage waiting for its cue to enter the scene. That's why youth is more a phase of data collection than of deep revelations. You test, fail, succeed, copy, imitate, and that's okay. The problem is when this becomes the default mode of adult life, even after 40. Many people reach middle age feeling displaced without knowing why. And the answer is back there. Perhaps they never asked the essential question: who am I without the roles I play? From here, awareness of the weight of the persona begins to emerge. Everyone has a persona. It's like a social outfit we wear to move through the world, polished, adjusted, pleasant. At first, it serves to protect, facilitate relationships, open doors. But the problem is when this outfit becomes a heavy armor. And the most curious thing, the more admired this persona becomes, the harder it is to take off. After all, no one wants to disappoint the audience that has applauded the performance for years. But living trapped in an image gets tiring. The person wakes up one day and wonders, if I were not what others expect me to be, who would I be? That's when the mask starts to feel tight. The persona, which once seemed like a tool, now becomes a prison. And this happens with successful executives, exemplary mothers, spiritual leaders, artists. No matter the role, anyone can get lost in the character. The danger lies in confusing the role with the essence. That's why perceiving the weight of the persona is an essential step in the individuation process. When the person begins to question the truths they themselves have constructed, something new opens up. And you don't need to drop everything or make external revolutions. Sometimes it's in silence, in journaling, in therapy, that this change begins. As an example, writing letters to yourself can be a powerful practice to rediscover the forgotten inner voice. And it's precisely in this listening that the awakening to something greater begins. Gradually, without fanfare, something changes inside. What once seemed urgent begins to lose strength. The person who was always racing against the clock now wants more time and less rush. Meetings lose their luster, while a peaceful lunch with someone dear becomes precious. It's not laziness, it's emotional wisdom gaining ground, reorganizing what truly matters. This change doesn't happen overnight, but it's clear. It's when the person begins to switch from how much I earn to who I am with, from what I've achieved to who I've become. And this affects everything: relationships, work, daily choices. Some decide to leave the big city, others change their routine to have more space to live. Small actions like turning off the cell phone at night or starting to cook at home take on new meaning. Deep down, it's as if the soul were asking for more presence and less appearance. And those who hear this call begin to feel a different kind of satisfaction, quieter but much deeper. The interesting thing is that the more you invest in meaning, the more life gives back in well-being. And then, even the way of thinking changes. The brain follows this maturation process and begins to act in a surprising way. Science confirms what many already feel and practice. Over the years, the brain becomes wiser. While in youth, emotions tend to take the wheel, in maturity they begin to share control with reason. This doesn't mean coldness, but balance. The brain learns not to react on impulse, but to respond with intention, and this small detail changes everything. Neuroscience studies show that around age 40, the areas of the brain linked to emotional self-regulation, like the prefrontal cortex, become more efficient. This means that anger that once exploded can now be perceived and redirected. Anxiety loses strength when there's internal clarity, and decisions begin to be made with more awareness, less fear, more maturity. It's like sharpening the blade of the mind after years of intense use. With this new perspective, the person stops sabotaging themselves so much. They begin to notice which habits drain their energy, which people add value, and which just take up space. They gain more clarity to make choices aligned with what really matters. And on this path, a new stage presents itself, reconnecting with parts of themselves that were forgotten, those parts that, when integrated, initiate a profound process of inner liberation. There comes a moment when the person feels they need to free themselves from invisible bonds. Not physical chains, but patterns, fears, and expectations that have accompanied them for decades. Carl Jung called this the shadow, everything we push under the emotional rug. The problem is that what isn't seen controls us from the edges. And that's where disentangling comes in, the process of facing head-on what we've always avoided. This can come in the form of a nameless restlessness, a silent discomfort, or even a strange dream that insists on repeating itself. It's the unconscious knocking at the door. The curious thing is that when the person begins to embrace these rejected parts, anger, fear, vulnerability, they realize that power exists there too. By integrating the shadow, a new strength is born, more honest, more whole. And this is the first step to living more authentically. But note, disentangling doesn't mean becoming another person. It means actually returning to who you truly are, just without the filters that were imposed along the way. This requires courage, but also brings a peace that can't be bought. It's a kind of silent freedom, born from internal truth. And in this reunion with oneself, an almost uncontrollable desire begins to emerge to stop living according to others. At a certain point in life, many realize that living to please others is like running on a treadmill. A lot of effort, little progress. Childhood shapes, adolescence adapts, and youth tries to fit into molds that don't always fit. But at 40, something changes. Reality begins to sink in. The person asks themselves, am I living what I want or what others expect of me? This question, although simple, has the power to change the game. It's in this phase that some decisions begin to seem urgent. Changing careers, ending a relationship, moving to another city. Everything that once seemed crazy now sounds like liberation. It's as if time began to be worth more and masks became too heavy. And those who have the courage to listen to this restlessness begin to redesign their own lives. Not to be perfect, but to be true, because authenticity comes at a price, but living a facade costs the soul. And the curious thing is that when the person begins to live according to their own values, they feel lighter. Decisions become clearer, the body responds better, and even relationships transform. The energy previously used to sustain an image now feeds deeper choices. And it's at this point that true freedom is born, the kind that doesn't depend on permission or external approval, but on a genuine connection with oneself. Real freedom isn't doing what you want when you want. It's being able to be who you are without having to apologize for it. Jung saw this moment as a kind of rebirth, but now, with emotional baggage, with scars that tell stories and a quieter mind, it's no longer about proving anything to anyone. The journey becomes more of an internal dance than an external one, and this changes everything. The person begins to allow themselves to laugh out loud, to say no without guilt, to rest without justifying, and mainly, they begin to make decisions aligned with their deepest desires, not with the script written by others. This doesn't mean becoming a hermit or breaking with everything. It means choosing what stays and what goes, consciously. It's a process that scares, yes, but liberates. And the most beautiful thing is realizing that this freedom doesn't arrive all at once. It reveals itself gradually, like someone turning on the lights in a dark house, room by room. Each new choice made from within illuminates the path more. And those who go through this phase, even with fear, discover that at 40, life isn't ending, it's just beginning. Now that you understand that life really begins at 40, tell me, what's still preventing you from living authentically? What's still tying you to the old version of yourself, built to please others? Perhaps the time has come to ask yourself courageously, who am I when no one is looking? Because that's where true power resides. You can no longer postpone your freedom. It's already knocking at the door, and only you can open it. Apply this knowledge in your daily life. Reflect on the choices you've been making. Rewrite your story with more awareness. And tell me, what was the moment in your life when you realized you needed to change course? Write in the comments. I want to hear from you. Your experience can inspire many people here. If this content resonated with you, subscribe to the channel now and hit the bell. This ensures you'll continue receiving videos like this, made with depth and purpose. And if you want to take the next step in your journey of self-knowledge, click on the video that's here in the end screen. I'll see you there.